Welcome everyone to Mailfuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about the X-Files Season 2, Episode 3. It is called Blood. And this one is about electronic devices convincing people to kill lots of other people. Okay, that's probably the dumbest way of saying it, but I actually really like the premise of this episode. I was very intrigued. I thought I really appreciated how it sets up that this is a sequence of things that's happening to multiple people, where different victims effectively are becoming perpetrators because they're getting paranoid and being convinced by messages coming from computers, ATM machines, basically anything with a screen of any kind. They're effectively going nuts and killing a group of people, usually a mass killing of some sort, whether it be everyone in an elevator, people at an event, or whatever. And while I appreciate that we have single examples, the one we start off on in the cold open for this character, Edward Funch, played by William Sanderson, who most people probably know as the toy maker dude from Blade Runner. But we get introduced to him, he's been laid off from his job, he's very on edge, and he starts seeing these messages on the computer. That's pretty much the cold open. I actually quite like that he ends up being kind of a through line where we keep coming back to him, slowly building up to being like the final killer of the episode. Whereas all the other examples we get introduced to them in one scene, and then the thing happens, or in some cases you don't even see it. Like the first guy after the cold open, when we come back from the title screen, we get this the elevator incident where this middle management type guy gets paranoid. He sees messages coming from the elevator display and ends up seemingly killing everyone in the elevator, but it doesn't show you him doing that. It shows you him getting kind of tense and sweating, and there's a lot of good direction in this episode from David Nutter, particularly with the Funch character, which I'll get to. But even here with this guy in the elevator, there's a lot of close-ups and really focusing on how sweaty he is. And it turns out that he's claustrophobic, and part of this whole sequence of turning people into killers is preying on their phobias. So in this case, it's like sort of saying, hey, if you kill all these people, you won't be as trapped in here anymore, kind of thing. The main villain we follow, Edward Funch, has got a fear of blood, so that's kind of what it keeps playing on him. And notably in the opening scene, he gets a paper cut and gets all kind of, weird about it. He's kind of staring at it, and it doesn't, it kind of sets up that he's got this fear throughout the episode with all these different examples of it coming up throughout. So we don't even see the event though. It just kind of cuts forward to the crime scene and Mulder being introduced to everything that's happened, and that the police are getting very concerned because this is like the 7th case of like murders like this that they've had. This is not a murder heavy place. The cops very proud of the fact that they've had very few murders in the last century, but the last couple of months they've had like 7 of these like spree killings or mass killings. It did occur to me going up to towards the end of the episode that effectively what we were building up to Funch doing was a mass shooting. Maybe not a term that was being widely used when this episode was made, but that's kind of what he was building up to do. So yeah, I really liked the premise of this one for a few different reasons. I thought all of the individual scenes of the various people who are being brainwashed effectively or manipulated into acting out these crimes, I thought were super compelling. And not because of I like the messages. That added obviously that X-Files space of, oh, is this in their head? Is this message coming from somewhere? Is this another kind of like AI that's trying to like convince them to do something or something else? Like, that was kind of a space that got added to it. But even just the setups themselves are so well directed, and the build up to them possibly doing something. And because each one has to deal with a different character who has a slightly different phobia and why they're ultimately convinced to like act out, it makes them all feel very different as well. While you've always got the messages coming from a computer display of some kind, you have a character who's scared of blood, you have a character who's claustrophobic, and then the wife character that we get introduced to, who ends up killing a mechanic, she's scared of being raped. And that scene I thought was very well done, where the mechanic's not actually doing anything particularly creepy or shady. It's all just in the cinematography and how he's lit. and the fact that she's scared of being close to him or being alone with him. So every time he says, hey, come here and I'll show you something, there's something wrong with your car, it comes off as the most intimidating thing in the world because of how it's presented, because that's how she's seeing it. So the direction is putting you in her head and how she's perceiving these events. But he's not actually doing anything wrong, as far as we can tell in the scene. So I really liked how all those scenes were handled. And I thought some of the stuff that they get into when we get to the reasoning for all this, I thought was good fun as well. Just mainly because we were still dealing with this idea of human life being expendable, some shady group, whether it be a part of the government, some corporation that is doing this. And I'll get to what the reasons are in a minute. I will say there are like two parts to the reason why the thing's happening, and part of it does seem to be heavily implied by Mulder, that the messages that they're getting from the digital displays, whatever they may be, are subliminal and therefore is something that is being put there by someone. It's not in their head. I think that is clearly kind of implied throughout what he thinks is going on by the end of the episode. And even the very final moment of the episode kind of lends itself to that as well, which is completely fine. It'd even be more fine now these days. But I did stop it and thinking about it a little bit. If there is someone triggering all these people with these messages via these various devices, I can buy them coming from computers, I can buy them coming from an elevator display, I can buy them being on like a TV commercial. We see that at one point. There's like sort of almost They Live style messages in the TV commercial. That's when Mulder's being affected by it and he can see it a little bit. The ones that I do question, though, are the ones that's like a calculator, because you can't really connect and send messages through a calculator. Well, okay, I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think you'd have to actually like take it apart and like hook into it and stuff. Modern calculators, maybe. I don't know. I've not used a calculator since school. I don't remember. I don't know, rather, like, if they're all like smart calculators now that have like actual internet connections and whatnot. But I do stop and question that a little bit as to how they're sending messages through some of the devices. Like, one's like a car dashboard, like, sort of display, which feels quite high-tech for, like, 1994. Like, that's really common now to have, like, touchscreen displays in cars and all that. That's super... I mean, obviously, it's not like a touchscreen. They don't say that, like, but... Still, the idea that there's a display that can be programmed to say different things feels a little bit fancy for the time period. So, yeah, but I did enjoy that part of the premise. I enjoy unraveling what's actually going on here. Mulder does make a couple of these big leaps. In fact, I got a big laugh early in the episode because after the first crime scene, Mulder's written a report that he sent to Scully, and we get kind of like him reading out his report, and we also cut occasionally to Scully's reactions. I also thought this was a really good bit of editing slash direction, because it kind of... You got as you were watching it that we're getting it from her perspective, because she's hearing all the things that he's saying through the report, as it were. But there's a moment where he throws in like a theory about how, well, some people say this kind of mass like psychosis can be a result of UFO abductions, and it just cuts to Scully sort of going, "Oh, I was wondering where you were going to get to that," and that made me laugh. Her poking fun at him trying to link everything he touches to his UFO and alien obsession is really funny. That I think it goes a long way, because he is a little too like extreme with it at times, and I think it goes a long way for the audience to have Scully be the voice of reason who calls him out for it. And it's nice that this thing had nothing to do with aliens. You know, he wasn't right about that. He does make some leaps throughout the episode, which are all correct. And they're not leaps to us, the audience, because we've seen enough of the evidence by watching all the various scenes. So we know he's right when he starts making some assumptions. He starts saying, hey, I bet he's got a fear of blood. Or, hey, I bet they're all getting messages from these digital displays, because there's... Every crime scene has something that's been smashed, whether it be the elevator panel, a mobile phone, or something, you know, whatever the messages were coming through. It seems like the victims like got angry and hit those things as well, trying to sort of like try to make the voices go away effectively. That's kind of, and we see that with Funch at one point when he's at the ATM, he starts hitting it because it keeps telling him to take a gun and kill someone. So I'm acknowledging that he does make some of these leaps, but honestly, I don't think there's any way around it in this episode, because this episode is very tightly paced. There's a lot to get through, and I find pretty much all of it entertaining. So for any little critiques I might be throwing at it, I'm sort of saying it in kind of like, okay, these are faults that I will admit, but ultimately don't really bring the episode down in any way. I think this is a really fun one. Especially the way it kind of seeds through this main villain that we're going to build up to being the one that Mulder can stop by the end of the episode. And then the others, of course, are just neat little scenes on their own. Obviously, the wife character gets away from the crime scene, does not end up sort of committing suicide by cop, as the others seem to have done, where they'll just get themselves shot so to end everything. She actually goes back home, and Mulder comes to speak to her, and she ends up getting knifey with him. Knifey's a word. I'm sure of it. But no, she gets more messages saying, "Hey, he knows, kill him now," kind of thing. And Mulder's very upset that the uniform cop shoots her, because he would like to obviously do some testing. He's starting to get he's got theories ruminating around there. But, I suppose a broad critique, perhaps, of this current status quo of the show, and I'm feeling it maybe a little bit now after 2 episodes of this. One was a bit different, but episodes 2 and 3 both kind of fall into this, which is that there's inherently just less Scully, because Mulder's the one getting the cases on his own, and he's getting help from her. She's doing some autopsies. She's, she does fly in at one point in the episode to study some stuff. But she's definitely not the partner right now, and she's definitely not as involved or as around as much, and that is a bit of a shame. So I do hope we get the X-Files reinstated with them as official partners sooner rather than later, if nothing else, because it does feel like Scully's kind of cordoned off a little bit from the main plot these last 2 episodes. So it would be very nice to have her more involved again. But yeah, so let's talk about what's going on here. We talked about subliminal messages a little bit, but it turns out the theory, and Mulder goes to the lone gunman, so we see them again this episode, and the pervy one is pervy again about Scully. Glad they're keeping that running joke going. But he finds out, or theorizes, that this is all about pesticides and chemicals. They talk about DDT. It's very hard for me not to just think of Jake the Snake Roberts when I hear those letters, but how this was a pesticide that later on they found raised breast cancer rates in women, and children were affected by it and all that, which I'm sure I vaguely heard about this in the past. It's a it's a real bit of history. But the idea that here LSDM is something that they found in one of the bodies, like on the fingertips, something to do with gardening, and then Scully looks into the dead body of the wife, and she's got some of this in her system. And basically the theory becomes is that it's a side effect of this. That basically this pesticide is designed to basically evoke the fear of the pests and make them leave effectively. And what's happening here is that it's evoking the fear sides of human beings, the ones who are heavily exposed. That's why it's tapping into their phobias. It's really tapping into that side. But of course, it goes further than that, because Mulder starts to theorize, particularly once he starts seeing the messages on the TV, because he goes out snooping around to see if they're spraying stuff in secret, and it turns out they are, and he gets a heavy dose of it, so he gets checked out. This is when Scully flies in to do some sciencey stuff. And he sees the messages on the TV, and he immediately starts talking about how this is the kind of thing that maybe this small town is being used as an experiment to see if they can use this in other manners. Like, the idea that they can maybe evoke someone in an enemy state to then go on a rampage and take out some key targets. Those military applications, perhaps, for this kind of thing. You can sort of let your mind fill in some of that. But he starts going down that rabbit hole, and like the local mayor or whoever he is that they're talking to, or the guy with the mustache, he refuses to admit at first that they're doing any spraying, but then he kind of admits it and says, look, this was proven to be completely safe to me. There's nothing wrong going on here. Our entire like economy in this town is all based on crops. We have to do this. But at this point, I think they say there's like 27 dead people since the start of these random murders have started. There's all this carnage. And it's all people that are, you know, aren't killers. It's all people, you know, I think the elevator guy, like the uniform cop who talks a lot with Mulder in this episode, he's like, hey, I know this guy. I play softball with him. He's a totally nice dude. Like, you know, it's people that others know. And I think that theme of bringing in that this is an experiment that some shady people are doing, whether it's some part of the government or some evil military corporation or whatever it may be, you know, that does feed into one of these ongoing themes of the X-Files, is the people up top making these decisions, disregarding human life. That theme coming in here makes a lot of sense to me. And in some ways, it's almost more interesting than the raw alien stuff of the show, is like how the powers that be will do heinous things with people and test things on people for their own gain down the line. Like, it doesn't matter to them if 27 people have died. It's all about them forming a new weapon, something they can do with it, you know? So, yeah, I like all those ideas. I think the episode gets you thinking about a lot of that stuff, and that's one of the strengths that the episode has. Because in many ways, the intrigue of the X-Files, obviously the aliens and all that stuff is cool, because it's fun and it's what makes part of the vibe and the excitement of the show. But if you actually think about what the appeal of the X-Files is in terms of how it relates to how people feel in the real world, it's not really specifically about the aliens and specifically about all these supernatural things that are happening. It's more about what are the higher ups hiding? What's going on that we don't know about? What's all of this kind of thing that is being done with a disregard for human life? Those are like more tangible things that we can kind of like latch onto that just directly relate to the real world. Like, are they up to something? Should we be paranoid? And paranoia is a big theme of this episode. In fact, you know, a couple times in this episode, Mulder's just called paranoid. Like, he's getting paranoid. So, yeah, all that stuff's good. As far as like how the scenes play out as the episode goes on, so there's more stuff with Funch. He goes looking for a job about halfway through the episode, and he's declined, and he's offered like there's like a blood drive going on, and he's like, hey, would you like to sign up for the blood drive? And so again, it's another trigger of his blood phobia. And then he looks over at the TVs. This is probably one of the best visuals of the whole episode, is all these TVs flickering, and they show like various different things. Like there's like riots, there's I think footage of like the O.J. Simpson like car chase, and I think Manson pops his face in there at one point. But it's just all these like sort of bad things that have happened like in recent human history. And it's like, hey, behind you, and he turns around and it's where the guns are being sold, which, you know, this is always one of these things in American stuff that's really weird to me, is that there's just guns being sold like next to the TVs. But so yeah, super fun direction in these scenes. I think one of the things they do really well with him later on is that once he does have a gun and he's on his way to, it seems like he's on his way to the hospital to commit murders. And Mulder's kind of figured this out based on clues in his apartment, based on his medical history, the fact that he has not been to a doctor in decades, and that he seemed to freak out and leave his place when the blood tester showed up. Because by this point in the episode, the mayor has agreed to let everyone be tested and that they'll stop spraying as long as they don't publicly have to admit that they caused any problems. So that seems like one of those things where reluctantly Mulder's probably agreed to it, even though he hates it, because stopping anyone else getting hurt is more important than him taking the blame for letting this happen. Not that the mayor would have known what the results of this stuff was going to be, but obviously he should be accepting the fact that he okayed it. And he tried to fight it. He tried to, you know, be like, no, we need this. It took the uniform cop to go and talk to him. We didn't even get to see that scene. You get the sense that it's someone he knows has convinced him to give in a little bit. But There's a great scene where Funch goes on a bus, and when he's on the bus, the screen at the front of the bus starts saying that they know, they're waiting, get off now, kind of thing. So he starts screaming at the bus driver to let him off because Mulder and the police are all waiting at the next stop for him to get off so they can arrest him. So he demands to get off the bus, and there's a great close up here as he starts just screaming, really like unhinged at the bus driver. You know, his hair's kind of falling down, he's getting all sweaty, and the actor's putting in a performance. Like, he is like yelling in the most deranged way he possibly can. And then similar, when he climbs this sort of clock tower at the college where there's a blood drive going on, and that's where he starts to actually try to shoot people, there's all these quick cuts to him in between the shots. You know, so you got Mulder and the police sort of like ducking around and trying to not get hit. You've got people running in fear, and you hear the gunshots. But every so often it cuts to a shot of him just in the tower, and he's just kind of laughing or looking really intense, and it's all these quick close-ups, and they just give it this frantic kind of crazy feel that his mind is very scattershot. It does a really good job of giving it a good atmosphere and really putting you in the moment. So yeah, Mulder ultimately climbs up the stairs and gets to him and tries to talk him down, and ultimately has to fight him. It's a nice little touch that he tries to talk about. It says, hey, if we shoot each other, there's going to be a lot of blood. And he tries to calm him, but unfortunately his wound from his arm is bleeding. This is the wound that he got from the wife earlier trying to stab him, for the record. I didn't mention she actually caught him, but he did get slashed on the arm, the poor bastard. But he ultimately at the end though, he's driven away, and Mulder goes to call Scully, and just as he's making the call, there's some messages on his phone saying, we're done now, bye-bye. Which clearly indicates that someone was testing this tech and was inflicting these murders to see if it would work. And now that they've been somewhat found out and it's proven successful, they're done. And it's almost like they're taunting Mulder. So the harsh fade to black with the credits is like, you just hear Scully over the phone saying, Mulder, where are you? Mulder, are you okay? And he just sits there kind of dejected because this is horrific. What, you know, the fact that anyone did this and was willing to have all these innocent people be killed to test their brainwash, like, rampage tech is horrific. So yeah, I enjoyed pretty much everything in this. Like, I think it doesn't stand out as a super special episode compared to maybe some of the ones that have asked more serious questions or have been more of a personal story to the characters. But I think as far as a standalone episode goes, this was really effectively shot. It did a great job of like building suspense over the course of the episode, with returning to that character Funch, because he's the big one. He's the one that we're building up to him finally snapping. All the other ones we only get one scene of, but they're fun scenes on their own right. But he's like building throughout the episode. And because of that, a lot of screen time is devoted to these like guest characters. And I do think William Sanderson does a great job as this unhinged guy in this role. I think all those scenes are good fun. But yeah, and then all of the actual theorizing about what's causing this, it definitely goes in places that I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting pesticides. I wasn't expecting, I was thinking it was more either in their head or something more specific to do with the fact that it's all these electronic devices that are talking to them. That some sort of virus is doing this to all these devices and it's convincing people to do this. But yeah, but the answers were interesting. It wasn't the most simplistic option, and because of that, it was always fun to think about what it meant and how it was working, and so it was a very easy episode to enjoy as far as entertainment value goes, and a fun premise to get into. So yeah, I had a good time with this one. I'm looking forward to next week. I just hope there's more Scully going forward, but we shall see. But that's my thoughts on Blood. Next time on the X-Files, we have an episode called Sleepless. Here's the description at IMDb. Mulder is on the manhunt for a Vietnam veteran who could project his consciousness into other people's minds to kill them. Mulder and Agent Krycek? I'll go with Krycek. That's how you pronounce that. Mulder and Agent Krycek try to uncover the conspiracy behind the killer's powers. Okay. Interesting. Stephen Williams and Tony Todd are in the next episode? Oh, that's cool. Alright, we got some more notable guest stars. I'm into it. So, we'll see. Although I don't like that he's working with another agent that's not Scully. Given the one complaint I had about these last 2 episodes is there wasn't enough Scully. So we'll see how that goes. But thank you very much for joining me. You can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep all the content coming. But thank you very much for joining. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got Eddie Vanilla?